Hi guys, in this video I'll be explaining why empaths often feel like they're not enough. And I did an Instagram live on this earlier tonight, but there were some technical issues, meaning I couldn't also save the recordings. So I've re-recorded this video and I hope that you'll find it helpful. I've identified 3 points why empaths can often feel like they're not enough. And the first is wanting to fit in. Now, they'll often feel like they want to fit into a mold that, unfortunately, is not made for them. They might surround themselves in a circle of people who are maybe not accepting or respectful of their differences and of their sensitivities, and that can be extremely invalidating. And what we want to do as human beings is adapt ourselves to our surroundings. So if we're trying to adapt ourselves to a surrounding that is nothing like the way that we were born to be, something that is totally different and foreign to the way that we are supposed to be, then it can be extremely challenging. And that relates to what we call the group bias, which is when we're surrounded by a group of people with a certain belief or opinion, then our minds end up adapting to it and becoming more like them. So if we're trying to become more like someone that we are not meant to be, then it can be extremely invalidating and making us feel like we're not enough, no matter how hard we try to change, that nothing is ever good enough. The second thing is our tendency as empaths to expose ourselves to toxic people and narcissistic people, our exposure to toxic environments and relationships. And the thing with narcissistic people is that they will even often sometimes tell you that you're not enough, that something you're doing is not enough, that the way you are is not enough. And they will gaslight you into believing things about yourself that might confuse your mind. They might make you believe that you're the one with the problem, and you're the one who's got mental health issues, and maybe that you're the one who's a narcissist. So they will get into your mind and confuse your mind. And that in itself can make you feel like you're not enough. They will even potentially tell you that no one will love you the way that they will. No one will love you the way I will. And therefore you're not worthy of being loved by anyone else. And I'm the only one who will love you. And that can feed your mind with all sorts of things that make you believe that you're not worthy of being loved by anyone. And that can actually trap you into that relationship of thinking, oh, he or she will be the only one who cares for me, so, or who really loves me. Maybe they're right, and maybe I should therefore stay. They will also treat you like you're disposable. So everything revolves around them and their needs and their wants. So you will only be of use to them for as long as they want you. So what that means is that they might be in contact with you when they need something and reject you when they don't. So you're only there when you're relevant to them, and you're only relevant to them if they need something of you. So they will treat you as if you're disposable. And when you're treated like you're disposable, it makes you feel extremely unworthy and therefore like you're not enough. The other thing which is quite common with narcissistic environments or toxic environments of any kind is that when you feel like you're not heard, when you feel like you're not understood or respected, then you'll feel like you need to change who you are and keep trying harder and harder to please other people and to get that validation that you so want. And being in an environment where you don't feel heard, whether it be work or home, it can be extremely, extremely invalidating and making you feel like you're not enough. And the third point as to why we might feel like we're not good enough or not enough is comparison. When we're used to being compared, even as children, if you come from a family, especially with narcissistic parents, where you're compared to a sibling, compared to their performance of, your sibling did this, you should be able to do that. So no matter how hard you try, you're not able to achieve the same things or to be in the same way as your sibling might be, so you feel like you're constantly fighting this battle of trying to change who you are. and possibly important aspects of who you are. So constantly trying to please a parent, but also in school, which then transfers into the workplace. But in school, in education, we're almost taught to measure our worth based on our grades, and we're constantly comparing ourselves to classmates. And if we're struggling to perform but trying really, really hard, and no matter what we do, it's still not enough, that can that can really ingrain that feeling of I am not enough no matter how hard I try. In adulthood, the way that transfers into adulthood, when you're raised in this way, whether it be through education or through family and parenting, is that you end up, as a consequence, comparing yourself to other people constantly, measuring your worth based on your achievements, or constantly trying to please family or parent, constantly measuring yourself up against other people, trying to become more like them because the way you are is not enough. And that can be extremely damaging. And actually, social media can make it very easy for us to do this, as we scroll through social media and compare our lives to a snapshot of someone's life which may or may not be real, without realizing that there's so much more behind that. And it makes us feel like if we're lagging behind in any aspect of our life, then we're losing the lottery of life that they've won and we've lost. The thing about comparison is that there is a saying that says comparison is the thief of joy. For as long as you're comparing yourself to others, you're not focusing on yourself. And when you're not focusing on yourself, there is no way of being joyful and happy. Another form of comparison is when a partner cheats on you. When someone cheats on you, it can lower your self-worth because you'll be comparing yourself to someone else, and you'll feel like you're missing something that someone else has, and that's why they've turned elsewhere. The actual fact of what it really means, though, is that a person who's cheating, they themselves are validation seeking. They are seeking validation that they're not feeling within themselves, or that they are not unable to communicate, and missing within themselves, and are seeking elsewhere. And really, they're not even thinking about anything to do with you, but it's more about their validation, which is quite addictive, that they're seeking because they're trying to fill something themselves. So those were the 3 important points of why we might not feel enough or good enough. So what happens when what's the impact of this as we go into adulthood? I've identified again 3 points here in terms of the negative impact that it can have. And then I'll come into the things that we can actually do in order to work on it. Now, the first thing is, if we constantly try to please others, constantly trying to give to please others, now this is in the workplace or at home or with friends, if we're constantly trying to please others, it will lead us towards burnout. And burnout is one of the most important or the biggest impacts that not feeling enough can have, because you're constantly trying to prove things to other people. And a lot of the time you can't please other people if they're because you can't control their behavior or their response. And you might even find yourself in a workplace that's not suited to you, and you're constantly trying to please someone who will never be pleased. Or it might be a narcissistic parent or partner who you're constantly trying to please, and all you end up doing is burning yourself out and not recognizing what your needs are anymore, or who you even are anymore. The second point is the consequence of not feeling good enough, is that our boundaries become entangled. And when our boundaries are entangled, it means that we end up allowing others to treat us in the way that we treat ourselves, with the same hate that we treat ourselves, with the same disrespect that we treat ourselves. So our boundaries become entangled because we're not connected to that sense of worth, because we feel like we're not enough. And the third point is we end up looking everywhere outside of ourselves, everywhere external to ourselves, in order to fix it, in order to fix this feeling or fill this feeling of not being enough. An example of this might be changing your appearance, changing the way you look. You might feel insecure in the way you look and like it's not enough, and that you've always felt the need to change who you are. So you might be trying to change your appearance. Or you might be relying on a partner or someone to fix you, to give you the sense of self-esteem that you so need, instead of looking within. Without realizing that self-esteem and self-worth, the word self is key here, and the word self comes from you, comes from within. Okay, so those were the three main points. One is the impact of that is burnout when you overgive, trying to seek validation. The second is your boundaries become entangled. And the third is we look for everything outside of ourselves instead of looking within. So how can we work on this? Now, again, I've identified three key points here. And the first is the big one, which is get to the root of the problem. Ask yourself, what is it that you notice about yourself when you're in your surroundings, when you're in your circle of people? What is it that you notice about yourself? Is there something that you're trying to change about yourself in order to adapt to the surroundings that you're in? Are you trying to fit into a mold that is not meant for you? Are you a square peg trying to fit into a round hole? What is it about yourself as a consequence to that you're struggling to accept? So what is it that you're trying to change about yourself in order to fit in, and why is it that you're trying to change it? What is it? What part of you are you not accepting? Which is the part of you that you're trying to change? What is it? Put your finger on it and try and pinpoint it. The thing about self-awareness is becoming curious about your thoughts and questioning yourself, having that conversation with yourself by questioning yourself. So what is it that I'm struggling to accept about myself that's making me want to fit into my surroundings? And are you maybe not accepting that specific part of yourself because someone growing up was not accepting of it? Or because an ex-partner wasn't accepting of that part of who you are, and it's developed that lack of self-esteem surrounding that way that you are, that part of who you are? And an important question here for you is, do you think that you're worthy of being loved? Do you think that you're worthy? Do you think that every child that comes into the world is worthy of being loved? And there really are no exceptions to this. So work on your self-love and self-compassion and get to know yourself. The way to get to know yourself is the way you would learn to get to know anyone else, even a partner or a friend. It's spending time with them and getting to know every part of them, different parts of them. So get to know different parts of who you are. If you're not clear on certain parts of who you are, so if you're not accepting of certain parts of who you are, get to know those parts. And the way to get to know those parts is, one, spending time with yourself. And two is surround yourself with communities of like-minded people. So if you're struggling to accept your sensitivities as an empath with highly sensitive people, find your community of people who are like-minded and who you can learn from, who you can learn about yourself through. And it's by surrounding yourself with like-minded people that makes you not feel alienated and make you feel like you're important and part of something. Because you feel accepted and you feel part of a community. As human beings, we all want to feel part of something. And you can even build different communities based on different parts of who you are. So if there are different parts of you that you're struggling to accept, an example might be high sensitivity, maybe something about the way you look, or maybe even your sexuality. If you can find other people who can relate to those parts of it, then it'll make you feel like you can belong to something. And I'll share a bit of my own experience as well. as well as being an empath, a highly sensitive person, I didn't understand it growing up. When I started to understand it, I was able to seek people who were more like that. And so I started to understand it better, and therefore it validated that part of me and made it feel like I wasn't different to everyone else out there, that there was something to be discovered within me. And the way to learn more about that part of yourself is to learn more about other people who are a lot like you as well, and in that way you can discover parts of yourself. Another part of my experience is my sexuality. Because growing up I didn't know people who were gay, to me it was something that shouldn't be done. Little did I know that it wasn't something that I could control in the way that my sensitivities couldn't be controlled. It's not something that you can change about who you are as a person. There is no right and wrong about it, it's just who you are. So when I started, when I was older, started to surround myself and find a community of people who were more like me, it made me feel more accepted and validated, like it was okay to be in that way. So it's by getting to know people who have experienced similar things and who seem confident as well in themselves, it has that knock-on effect of thinking, okay, so it is possible to be a confident, highly sensitive person, and it is possible to be a confident gay person. So what I suggest is identify different parts of yourself and search for those communities so that you can start to learn more about yourself and get to know yourself in the way that you would a partner. And that's how your love grows, your self-love grows. The other thing that that ends up happening with narcissistic people that is really important to understand is this. We end up feeling not good enough as a consequence to a narcissist's projections onto us. But what's really important to understand is that narcissists project their own insecurities because they themselves don't feel enough. Because they themselves are insecure and don't feel like they're enough. And therefore they project it onto you. So the first thing that's really important to understand is it's not yours. This feeling of not enough isn't yours, it's them. Throw it back at them. It belongs to them. It's not yours. They're just projecting whatever they have onto you. And I'd like to share a metaphor that I've actually read about recently, which is this. When you squeeze oranges, you get orange juice. So within the orange, you have orange juice. So when you squeeze it, you get orange juice. When you squeeze someone who has a lot of pain inside them, a lot of trauma inside them, when you squeeze someone with a lot of pain, what comes out is pain. So what projects out is pain. So whatever they're feeling towards themselves, they project onto you. We all end up treating others in the way that we treat ourselves. So there's something that they're suffering from within themselves that they need to project onto you. So it's more to do with them and their feelings of not being enough that's being projected onto you. Okay? Now, with all these voices that are telling us we're not enough constantly, what we can do is learn to tune them down. And one way is to recognize that it's not yours, it's theirs, and send it back to them. And as you do that, you're changing this relationship that you're having with the voices, with the thoughts. So in time, you can start to tune those down gradually. And then they become whispers. And when they become whispers, you can start to even improve that relationship between you and the thoughts, and keep having those conversations with them. But it is possible to tune them down and eventually to eliminate those thoughts of not being good enough, because you will have built a more sturdy ground of being enough and being worthy, and align your life with that. You end up realizing that those voices are not only theirs, but they are their broken voices that are being projected to you, and those broken voices are theirs, not yours. They're theirs, which they've internalized and that they're projecting. So that's one big important point, and that's why it's so important to develop a learning but also a self-awareness. The second is be clear on your boundaries. What is it that you're willing to accept and what is it that you're not willing to accept? Your aim is to align all of your values with your align all of your boundaries with your values and your worth. And the more self-worth you gradually develop, the less guilt you'll feel as you set your boundaries. And the third thing is comparison. Going back to comparison. Now, what's really important to understand about comparison is that, first of all, you can't expect yourself to be great at everything at the same time. And to focus on everything at the same time and master everything at the same time. You might end up finding someone who's put so much focus into one thing that you've maybe not put as much focus in, but then suddenly you want to catch up when you've actually been focusing on something else and giving that your priority. So that's one important point of you can't expect yourself to be great at everything all of the time. And figure out where your priorities are and what's important to you, where your focus is. And don't distract yourself away from that goal. Also, if you've got a goal in mind, look at people, instead of comparing yourself in a negative way to people who have achieved something that you're wanting to achieve. Try and learn from them, learn from their strategies and try and feel inspired by them so that you don't limit yourself, because when you start to compare yourself, you're stealing away from yourself. You're drawing yourself away from that goal instead of getting you closer to it. Now, another really key thing about comparison is that we live in a material world where it convinces us that there are only a limited number of seats available, that there are only a limited number of people who are able to succeed at certain things or able to achieve certain things, and that if we haven't gotten to that point and they have before us, then it means that we've lost and they've won. And this is unfortunately what today's society has developed within us, that we won't be successful and happy if someone else has gotten there before us in a certain field, potentially. So we end up feeling that our chances decrease if someone else's chances increase. And here's a really beautiful point in regards to that. So if our perception of that is because of the material world and material reality that we live in, monks, who are some of the happiest and joyful people in the world, actually, in contrast, believe that every person in the world has a seat. And it's just a matter of time of how long it takes for you to get to your seat. So they believe that when it comes to happiness and joy, there is a seat with your name on it. And there is a seat with everyone else's name on it. And that you can all enjoy each other's successes together. And that there really is no limit. There's an unlimited number of seats, and there's an unlimited amount of things that you can achieve, and everyone will have a chance at getting a seat towards being happy and joyful, and actually also not only celebrate your own successes and happiness, but also celebrate everyone else's around you, because then it doubles up on the joy and the happiness rather than just feeling it when it happens to you, which is actually such a beautiful thing. Imagine doubling up on your joy every time someone succeeds at something rather than comparing yourself negatively to them. That is the goal that we should all strive for. I hope you've all found this helpful, and again, if you joined my live today, I'm sorry about the technical issues, but I hope that I have covered most things, and if not, then please drop me a message. I answered a few questions during the live, but if you have any more, then please just drop me a line, okay? Take care, guys.